Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being followed in the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined this week by Thad Greenson, news editor, and Jennifer Fumiko Cahill, arts and features editor at the North Coast Journal. Welcome, guys.
How you doing, Dave? How you doing?
Pretty good. I think like Thad and probably a lot of other folks in the community, last night we were up pretty late into the wee hours because it was primary election day. So a little dragging because we did coverage late into the evening for Access Humboldt and also for local radio station KMUD. So let's dive right in, Thad. I know that I saw your name on a bunch of articles that came out into the wee hours. Why don't you give us a little bit of feedback on what you experienced?
Yeah, I experienced sleep deprivation. We, in addition to covering the results as they come out on election night, which, is a endeavor that kind of begins with the first returns around 8:30 after the polls close and then extends until the last report, which last night didn't come until I think a little bit before 1 a.m. Then to get those results in the edition of the North Coast Journal that comes out on newsstands this morning, we then have to meet a 6 a.m. print deadline, which means that I needed to turn around and get this story that I wrote and the election grids to our wonderful production manager who dragged herself out of bed first thing in the morning. Needed to get those to her by 5. So it combined for not much sleep. So if I start rambling unintelligibly, nudge me back in the right direction.
All right. Hey, Thad, do you remember the year that I was supposed to get up and proofread for you and I 100% slept through my alarm?
I 100% remember that. You've noticed that you have not been tapped for pre-dawn proofreading duties.
I did notice. I did notice. Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, is that the cover story or is there some other cover that we should allude to before we dive into the election results?
Well, it's not the cover story. It's just a single results page. But this week's cover story is, in fact, related. We dive in the cover story into the grand jury report and kind of the last minute happenings in the auditor-controller race, which has been kind of wild and contentious from the start and kind of went off the deep end last week, as the election approached.
So that's like a loaded kind of topic. I hate to like that pregnant pause, leave it there. Do you want to tease that a little bit, or should we just go right to the cut to the chase and talk about the outcome so far?
Yeah, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole because it is a deep rabbit hole, but I will just say that the grand jury, which had kind of previously for some years had a standing policy not to release reports within months of a June election, released a report, I think 5 days before the election that was just absolutely scathing of the incumbent auditor-controller and raised a lot of questions about why they had kind of deviated from longstanding process and whether there were some political motivations there. And so we obviously can't really answer the question of the grand jury's motivation, but we certainly tried to answer questions about what was in the report, how it came together, why it rolled out in the way it did. And yeah, so that's some interesting context for anybody who wants to pick up the cover story this week.
I am intrigued, in part because, like you said, the whole Comey letter thing where we talk about it for years after. Did it influence the outcome in any way? And, I guess that we'll see how that plays out.
Well, I will say, I guess transitioning to the results themselves, I think that the auditor-controller race was what most people was probably the biggest ticket item on this year's ballot locally. And, Cheryl Dillingham, the challenger, won very decisively. Took 70% of the vote, to Paz Dominguez, I think 23%. So while, it's certainly unknown kind of to what degree the grand jury report played a role in that, I would be very hard pressed to say that her win is entirely due to the grand jury report. It seems hard to imagine that that the report would have moved the needle that far.
Sure. Based on all the, I would say, controversy and energy that's been, we've covered here sort of ad nauseum over the last weeks, months, feels like years, unfortunately. Okay, well, I think that's the big takeaway. Like you said, that's the race everybody was following most closely. Before you tell us the observations about some of the other races, can you just let us know? So far, you said that this release of the count from the county. How far along are they in the counting process? Do you recall what percentage approximately we've counted so far?
Yeah, so the short answer is we don't know. We have an inquiry to the elections office trying to get an estimate of how many ballots, cast ballots, remain outstanding and yet to be counted. But as of now, we don't know what that number is. The number that was posted on Election Day is about 17% of registered voters, which is a dismal turnout. Even in past years, you figure about maybe about 2/3 of the vote is tabulated on election night, and then another third comes after the fact in either provisional ballots that are processed or vote by mail ballots that were turned in on the polls on election day or show up after election day, because as long as they're postmarked by election day, they are considered valid. So usually about a third of the vote comes after, kind of in the post-election night tallies. But even if that's the case here, that would put, our turnout up to about 25%, which is still pretty dismal even for a midterm primary.
And that's actually short of the estimates, depending on the source last night. Because last night there was actually 7 states that had primaries, so it's the most in the country this year, the most states in one day. But still, no matter who you listen to, they were anticipating a very low turnout. 30% was expected, and California, the rate of return was even predicted to be a little bit lower. So that might be consistent with expectation. Unfortunately, the lack of civic engagement is a little disturbing, but not who am I to judge? I think apathy is self-preservation for a lot of people. So for what it's worth, even though I strongly endorse participation, I understand why some people just look away from the train wreck.
I totally understand that, and I will judge very briefly here. Not to go too far off on a tangent, but democracy is not a spectator sport, and for all of the apathy about the train wreck that people see as our as our institutions and our government, the only way to fix that is voting. Apathy will not fix a single thing.
Yeah, I'm usually the loudest, most strong advocate. I was playing devil's advocate there for a minute, but thank you for putting me back on the path. I appreciate the ballast. So what other races stand out to you or some local results that people might want to hear about today?
Yeah, so I actually led the story that we have in this week's journal with kind of the line that was an election night that was really short on drama and long on wait times. There weren't too many close races on the ballot, so we got really decisive wins in the 5th district. Incumbent Supervisor Steve Madrone handily won re-election. The district attorney's race, which was a 3-way race, saw Stacey Eads, the deputy district attorney and kind of heir apparent to Maggie Fleming, who's stepping down at the end of her term, won very decisively, I think with close to 60% of the vote. Let's see what else. The races that are close and kind of interesting are the 4th district supervisorial race, which was a 3-way race between Natalie Arroyo and Kim Burgell, both of the Eureka City Council, and former City Council member Mike Newman. And the intrigue there isn't so much it being a close race. Natalie Arroyo had just over 50% of the vote, and I think Newman was in second with about 36%. So a very handy lead there. But in order to avoid a runoff election in November and kind of win the race outright, a candidate needs to get 50% plus 1. And in the final tally on election night, Natalie Arroyo was at 50.21%. So just kind of clinging to that outright win. And throughout election night, as kind of the more and more ballots got added, her lead kind of got whittled down. So it's quite possible she'll fall below that 50% threshold, which would then trigger a runoff between her and Mike Newman in November, which is which would just mean a whole new race and a whole new campaign season for them. And then similarly in the race for clerk recorder, registrar of voters, Tiffany Hunt Nielsen had a not as commanding a lead at all. I think she had about 46+% of the vote to Juan Pablo Cervantes, 42 or 43%. So it was a fairly close race. And that one looks like it is definitely going to go to a runoff in November. It's still certainly mathematically possible, but it would be kind of a statistical anomaly if somehow the outstanding ballots really push her over the 50% threshold.
Gotcha. Well, cool. Thank you for that kind of rundown of the significant local races.
Yeah. The other one that I missed earlier is Arcata City Council. Arcadans know there is a contentious 6-way race for the seat that became vacant midterm, and so it's just finishing the last 2 years of the term. And Alexandra Stillman, the former council member and longtime kind of Arcata leader, is running away with that one. She had, I think, about 41% of the vote or 42% of the vote, almost doubling up the next up. So, and because that is a special election to fill a vacant seat, it will not go to a runoff. There's no runoff provision. So it looks like she'll win that outright and soon be seated on the Arcata City Council.
For a couple of years, I think. Is that right? Do you know?
Yep, it's a 2-year term. So I think she serves through 2024.
Gotcha. And so what I was starting to say is, like, for folks who aren't sure or don't know, all this is available on the grid that you've created this week's edition, and also online. So there's more in there, like the assembly race, which was a runaway for the incumbent Jim Wood, and the Senate race, which was a runaway for incumbent Senator Mike McGuire, and Senator Padilla, and all this statewide races. For the most part, I think there was only a couple of statewide races that were even close or not the incumbent getting reelected. So it's not very many surprises this time around.
No, it was in that sense it was a pretty dull election night, to be perfectly honest.
Right on. Thank you for carrying the burden and depriving yourself of sleep and keeping us informed. We really appreciate your efforts this week, or this last night.
My pleasure. It's a testament to what a civic nerd I am, is that even in years when in the run up to the election, I'm just like, I just want this to be over. Can we just fast forward to June 8th? When election day actually comes, I get excited and I can't wait for the returns to come. So it was fun.
We did 5 hours of live coverage last night. Just imagine, that's pretty rough.
That's super rough.
Yeah.
Especially when there's not many nail biters going down. It's a lot of space to fill.
Exactly. And we had the whole country to choose from, and there wasn't a lot of exciting races anywhere. But, that's a different story. Well, thank you again. We appreciate you in a big way.
Likewise, Dave.
How about you, Jen? What is going on this week in the Arts and Features beat?
Well, first of all, I am fresh as a daisy because I slept in.
Oh, no. Rubbing it in.
I'm a monster. I'm so sorry. Actually, we have a really cool back of the book this week. And I do want to point out that if you go through the calendar and look, things are, we're getting back a lot of events that we've missed for a long time. I noticed that the Humboldt Roller Derby is back on their skates and hosting an event, a fundraiser kind of thing. And, there's just all sorts of things happening again that we haven't seen for a while. And it's lovely to see. And Kali Koziris, our calendar editrix, is out there culling all kinds of events. If you're doing something and you forgot because it's been 2 years, make sure to hit up calendar@northcoastjournal.com and let her know so that we can share it with everyone. It's been a minute, for example, since we had the Lao New Year event. And I had the pleasure that used to be the annual pleasure, but we had a 2-year hiatus on the Lao New Year that gets held over at the Humboldt Grange, which is over on Humboldt Hill. And it was just lovely to see again. Everybody shows up, and it's an open to everyone event. So it is, a Lao cultural event, and it's for Lao New Year, which is not the same thing as, for example, Chinese New Year, Lunar New Year in February, typically. It is usually the Lao New Year falls in April, and usually in our area, the celebration is in May because those monks are busy. The monks that they get from Santa Rosa who come up and chant all the livelong day, they got a booked schedule. They got to travel all over the place. There are not that many Buddhist monks who are Lao, speak Lao. So this year they got them, first week in June. And it was once again a packed hall. They had all the doors and everything open, and the kitchen has 4 long tables made to make a big square and completely covered in these aluminum trays full of everything. And it's just marvelous. You see, egg rolls stacked up like lumber, and all of these big trays of like fish with chilies all over it, and tons of like fried noodles and like striped jelly desserts and all kinds of marvelous Southeast Asian, mostly Lao, but Southeast Asian foods. And the smell and the flavor profile of Lao food is so different that you walk in and you're just like, this is the smell of Lao New Year. And, everybody's crowding around, and they haven't seen each other in some cases in a long time because people come from all over. Some people come from out of town. I spoke to one woman who drove 16 hours from Utah.
What?
Yeah.
So this is big.
I know. But at the same time, try getting a good egg roll in Utah. I feel like no. So, she came and she was saying that it was worth it to her because her family's here and she wanted to see everyone. And also she wanted to be here to help take her 96-year-old grandmother to get a blessing. And that's another thing that the monks do. They have these wonderful kind of like decorative trees up front, and people tie money to them, and children line up to get a little woven bracelet and a blessing. And again, it's one of those things that because it is Buddhist, you can go, and it's not a thing where it's not the kind of religious experience where people are excluded. Everyone is invited to participate and to join in. There's a part of the day where the families line up with what's called an which is like a fancy footed goblet, big. And there's all kinds of food and things inside of it. And we did a story a couple years ago about Lao New Year's, and have a really big slideshow that's from Mark McKenna that's really lovely. And you can see that some people have just sort of traditional Lao foods and fruits and things in there. And some people have like a candy bar or something. It's a little bit, if you're familiar with the Mexican ofrenda at Dia de los Muertos, it's the favorite foods and offerings for the people that you've lost, right? For your ancestors or your immediate relatives. And all of that gets, blessed, prayed over, and you send your heartfelt wishes to your family. And the night before all of this, and probably days before, but definitely the night before, tons of people get together and cook in households. I spoke to the couple who run the Lao Oriental shop in Henderson Center, and they're the Sisambeth family. I spoke to Danny Sisambeth about him being the sort of chair of the event this year. It's a rotating position of, one person kind of becomes the point person. And it was interesting because he's very modest about his contribution. So I asked him like, okay, so how much did you contribute from the store? How many hours does it take you? What did you put into this? And he was like, oh, everybody's equal. We're all giving what we can. We're all doing what we can. But but he was forthcoming about the fact that his wife was cooking all night.
Mhm.
And she and like 30 other people, he said at least 30 people were in his house, in his kitchen, which I have to see this kitchen.
Right.
They were there. And his wife, Kemputh, I think I'm saying her name hopefully close to how I should say it. His wife was just in there cooking, and he said they made like, I was like, so what? How many dishes did they make? And he said, I don't know. He's like, I can't, maybe, I was like, 10? He said, at least 10, maybe more. And looking around the room, I get it. Like that, it's a lot of food. And it's all, these are not necessarily written recipes. These are things, handed down, and family recipes, and everybody kind of, I remember one year I went and they had this fantastic lap, which is a kind of a salad. Like if you're familiar with the Thai larb, lap is somewhat similar, but a different flavor profile. And there were these clams, like razor clams that were in it. And I was like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. And the woman told me, well, we gathered this ourselves at the beach. And I was like, wait, but isn't there a domoic acid ban right now? And she was like, it's fine.
Okay.
And God help me, I ate it and it was fantastic.
Okay, good.
And I live to tell the tale. Don't do this. Don't try it at home. But people are like gathering things. People are growing vegetables. People are, going way out of town to get, everything from spices to herbs. There's so many like fresh herbs and things, and mints and basils and things that go into Lao food. And it's a Herculean effort. And also I should point out, I mentioned in the article, Kamputh was wearing white. She was out here cooking and cleaning up and everything in white. And I was like, you are a queen. But it was really something to see too, the Lao dancers, the Humboldt County Lao dancers. Right. You'll see them at different events. Like they were at the Chinatown celebration in Eureka. And the last time, well, I saw them recently, but the last time I saw some of these girls, they were little. And in 2 years, these girls grew up, and the dance has changed with them, right? Because now they're young women and they have confidence, and there's, weight to their movements, and it's a different experience. It was really lovely to see everybody cheering them on and, gifting them with flowers and cash when it was all over. And, how kids are, they're like surreptitiously trying to look and see how much cash did I get, being modest, but still like, So it was, like, it was really, right? We've all been there, graduation parties, come on. But it was lovely to see everybody coming together again. And one of the Lao dance teachers, one of the founders of Humboldt County Lao dancers, Ampha Manarin, sadly could not make it because she was exposed to COVID. And she actually had to isolate herself in her home way ahead so that her daughter could go. She was not going to let her daughter miss this big community event and performance. And she told me about how, it's been a rough couple of years. She lost her mom in 2020. Oneta Sayavong passed away. She was a big part, Oneta Sayavong, she was a big part of the community. And, she lost also a cousin. It was possible to have small funerals, but with the monks, that's half the capacity of your funeral, your gathering, right? And they could not have the big kind of community gatherings. They couldn't, just like anybody who missed funerals, weddings, and things like that. But this, being able to gather again for blessings, for something good, and to be able to come together and share, it was a big deal for people. And it was hard to be like any tight-knit community where everybody knows everybody else and everybody's like family, for better or for worse. It's hard to be apart. So it was really beautiful. And I feel very lucky that I got to see it. It was a joy to see it back in action.
Well, this is really awesome. This sounds so festive. Thank you for helping share some of the nuances and customs and elements of it that we wouldn't really get otherwise. So we're really glad you were there and could share with us today.
Oh, and shout out to Lucky Thavasak, who's a wonderful help in, he and his wife Bauer, wonderful help with translating and introducing me to people. And it's very helpful.
Great event, open to the public next year, in theory.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Well, it's my kind of place. So thank you again.
Thank you.
That's about all the time we have this week. Thad and Jen, thank you so much. This was really great. Thank you for your sacrifice, whether it was depriving yourself of sleep or indulging in the festivities. We really appreciate you guys. Yeah, it's hard, right? Well, North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick one up, stay informed. Also available 24/7 online, so you can check them out anytime. Until next time, take care. We'll see you again next week.